Hey everyone, Nux here, and today, for the first time in a while, I want to do an idea video series, discussing what I personally want to see with a particular concept and or project that could happen in the future. And the topic that I want to cover today is the next installment for the Mario Kart series. Now, Mario Kart pretty much needs no introduction, because I'm sure that most of you know what it is, and how big of a deal it is among Nintendo's arsenal of games. But what you might not know, based on this channel alone, is that I am a big fan of many of the Mario sub-series, and especially Mario Kart, which to me is one of the most fun multiplayer focused games out of the many that I've played. Recently, I've grown a desire to play through some of my favorite games of the series, and this has slowly made me hungry for the true next installment of the franchise. While we do have the deluxe port of Mario Kart 8 on the Nintendo Switch, I feel like that port only added so much new content, and while it was a steal for those who didn't play Mario Kart 8 back on the Wii U, those of us who already bought Mario Kart 8 and its DLC years ago have been hungry for something a bit newer. That's why, while we're waiting for the true next installment of the series that isn't a port or a mobile game, I wanted to put together my personal take on what the next Mario Kart game should be like, and I've been brewing up specific ideas and thoughts for this topic for quite some time now. So buckle up folks, here's my outline for the next Mario Kart game. Before we dive into the specific details for this potential new Mario Kart, let's talk about a few general outliners about the game itself. Questions such as, will this Mario Kart game be on Nintendo Switch, despite the Switch already having one in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Will it run on the same engine as Mario Kart 8? Or will it go for a completely new engine and an entirely new visual style? We really have no concrete way to know these things as of the time period of this video. But if I had to take a few guesses, I would say that I think this game will run on a slightly modified engine of Mario Kart 8. And the game will look differently in some form. This is basically what ended up happening to Smash Bros. When it came to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. As for the game system, I'm going to predict that this potential upcoming Mario Kart will still be on the Nintendo Switch, but it could also be a big pusher for the next model of the Switch, as there have been rumors of a Switch Pro or updated Switch model for a while now. And I think that due to the Switch's success, Nintendo will stick with the Switch brand and hybrid system format for years down the road. Now let's look into the game itself. This might seem like a bit of a nitpick, but if I'm going to outline something first with a new Mario Kart game, it's going to be the name. Can we please ditch the naming conventions of some of the last few Mario Karts and just have a normal subtitle? No name like Mario Kart Switch or Mario Kart 9, just a regular set of words for a subtitle. It's just something that I personally dislike about some Nintendo games. I still love the games, but just hate their names sometimes. Side rant done. Now then, besides the name of the game, another big factor to consider for this next Mario Kart is questioning how the game is going to work, and what is going to be the next big gimmick. And I don't mean gimmick in a bad way, I mean it in the sense that we have to ask what features will be present in this game and what the overall theming will be. In my opinion, I think that the theme for this next Mario Kart should be making it into the ultimate Mario Kart experience. And no, I don't mean ultimate as in everyone is here like with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where the game focuses on bringing in older content as opposed to new stuff. Though I have seen a few videos exploring that idea, and there's even a pretty funny parody I've seen of it. But no, that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is that I want a focus on capturing not only the best of Mario Kart, but the best of the Mario universe, having a balance between bringing back old elements of the series and bringing in a ton of fun, new Mario themed elements. I think that Mario Kart has so much potential to do some really cool things with just the Mario universe still. And the reason why I stress this is because it seems like a lot of people lately have been encouraging this idea where Mario Kart evolves into more of a Nintendo All-Stars racing type of game, where it's basically Super Smash Bros. But in race karts. And while I'm not entirely opposed to that idea, I don't think Mario Kart has grown stale to the point where it needs to 180 in that way completely. I want Mario Kart to stay a Mario racing game still, as it's what the series has always been, and I think that they haven't stretched the concept so thin to the point where they need to bring in characters and ideas from other franchises. I know this is kind of ironic coming from the guy who disliked Sega All-Stars Racing de-evolving into the more Sonic-focused Team Sonic Racing, but that's just how I feel. And of course, I know that they've already started playing with this idea in the Mario Kart series itself with Mario Kart 8, with the inclusion of characters like Link from The Legend of Zelda or the Animal Crossing characters. But despite how cool that was, I remain hardened on my stance. Well, kind of. You'll see what I mean later in time. Okay, so while that covered the general theming of the game, what about the mechanics? When it comes to the mechanics of the Mario Kart series, some of you know that I hold the opinion that I do think that Mario Kart 8, and especially its deluxe port, were near perfect outliners for the series. A lot of the things that the game has is pretty much the definitive way to play Mario Kart, and most of its concepts should be held onto going forward. For example, some staple mechanics that were featured in Mario Kart 8, such as car customization, underwater driving, and paragliding, should all return. These are things in that game that I think generally everyone loved and enjoyed, and have no real reason to not come back. I also think that the dual item system that was brought back into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe should also return. Some people had a problem with this due to the increased items and chaos it brought, but I personally think it worked just fine, and added that much more depth into the races. The core mechanic that I question the return of the most is ironically Mario Kart 8's main gimmick and advertising point, being the anti-gravity. I personally loved the anti-gravity and thought it added a lot of aerodynamic fun to many of that game's tracks, but I'm not fully sure if it's going to return, and not sure on how I feel on whether it should or not. Again, I enjoy the mechanic greatly and would love to see it back, but if axing it to get more new and fresh ideas is a potential obstacle I were faced with, I would definitely make the sacrifice. But just because of my love for Mario Kart 8, I'm going to say that I think the mechanic will return, and I would personally feature it as a part of this game, just no longer the main focus of it. A potential new replacement or coexisting mechanic that could be dug back up for this game is the drilling idea that the Mario Kart team had during the concept stages of Mario Kart 8, where you use a drill to access underground parts to a track you are racing on. I think it could be a cool side mechanic alongside the returning anti-gravity. In terms of any old mechanics I might want back, custom emblems returning would be really cool, as that is a feature of Mario Kart DS that I missed. Oh yeah, I guess I should probably talk about one of the most requested features to return in all of Mario Kart, being the double driver mechanic from Mario Kart Double Dash. And honestly, I personally do not care all too much for that feature, and I don't think it needs to return for this game. Now, before you murder me, hear me out. I do love that game, and the mechanic is very unique and very fun. But I honestly don't see the feature being necessary for this Ultimate Core Mario Kart game of mine, as I feel that it would change up a lot of factors with some of my own ideas here. I would be interested in a dedicated Double Dash sequel game, and may do a separate video on possible ideas for how to do that, but for now, I don't think it is a feature that should return for the next game, though having swappable items like in Double Dash would be pretty cool. So those are the core and general ideas, but there is obviously a lot more to a Mario Kart game than that. And that is what we are going to tackle next. Something to note, although I do think that Mario Kart 8 and its deluxe variant outlined a definitive template for the series to build a new installment off of, That is not to say that I thought the games were perfect, as there are a lot of additions and changes that I would make going into a new game, which you will see over the course of this set of videos. So now, let's cover the main modes for my idea of the next Mario Kart. Here we have the main modes for this game. It is structured in a very similar manner to Mario Kart 8, where we have single player, multiplayer, online, Mario Kart TV, and the Mario Kart shop. While the structure here is mostly similar, it will obviously look different in this new game, with a new UI, new artwork, and all that stuff, which is pretty fair to expect. However, as we go through these modes, I'll cover some of the changes and additions that I would want, as well as returning things that are standard or otherwise. In the single player tab, the biggest front and center option is a new mode I would add into this game, being a story mode, which I will go into more detail with later. Then the rest that we have here are pretty much standards. We have the Grand Prix, which are the classic tournament style races that feature all the courses and the cups there within. For this, I would expect the return of 50cc, 100cc, 150cc, Mirror Cup, and even the return of Mario Kart 8's 200cc as well. We also have the return of the time trial and versus race options. Standard modes that will work the same as always, maybe with some new additions. And of course, we will have the return of Battle Mode. Now, as people know, Mario Kart 8 was originally infamous for having one of the worst battle modes in the series, due to its lacking features, lacking options, and just soulless feeling. But luckily, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came to the rescue with a revamped battle mode that was much better. Of course, despite how much better it still wasn't perfect. But first, let's talk about what did work with this battle mode. I did think that all the options of this battle mode, including Balloon Battle, Renegade Roundup, Bob-omb Blast, Coin Runners, and Shine Thief, were all good modes that deserved a return in this game. Maybe a few slight fixes to better the quality of the minigames themselves, but otherwise, good stuff. But I do have some big improvements that I would add to this mode. Firstly, I want the battle mode of this new Mario Kart game to have a focus on original dedicated battle courses again, as opposed to the slightly retooled battle courses of existing tracks that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had. The layouts of the battle courses in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe weren't too bad per se, but they just don't beat the uniqueness of the original battle courses, especially some of the ones from older games. So for this battle mode, I would have the battle courses split into the Nitro and Retro categories, in a similar way to the usual track setup. Nitro courses could be entirely new ideas for battle courses, or courses that are slightly retooled but completely built into entirely new levels. And Retro battle courses would be battle courses that originate from older games, such as Cookie Land from Mario Kart Double Dash, or Funky Stadium from Mario Kart Wii. However, these retro battle courses would be remade from the ground up into these new, beautiful HD courses. The last major change I would make to battle mode is in modes such as Balloon Battle or others. Rather than respawn as a ghost player that has to use weaker items to hurt others, bring back the mini bomb carts from Mario Kart 64, where players manually control these deadly explosive carts and just ram them into the other players. I don't know, I just think it would be funny to see the remaining players try to avoid the other players who are now just mini bomb carts. I think it would be a pretty funny change, and it would be fun to chase around the remaining players as these mini bomb carts, as opposed to trying to hit them with a banana or a shell. So that's about it for those modes in the single player tab. And of course, the multiplayer one simply consists of Grand Prix, Versus Race, and Battle Mode, which are pretty much the same modes as the ones we already touched on. So there's not much there to cover. For the online mode, it will work in a very similar way to Mario Kart 8 and its deluxe variant, where you have the options to race worldwide, do races within your own region, race with friends, or hold tournaments. And of course, you'll have your online battle mode as well. All of these will also have their own little rank system that is very similar to how it worked in Mario Kart 8. For the tournaments, while they were a great new addition, they still had some potential room to grow, needing more specific options available to set up the ideal tournament you want. But aside from that, I have no other gripes there. I would hope that the Mario Kart TV feature that was introduced in Mario Kart 8 would return, as it was a cool new feature that could really highlight some of the best moments of a race, and it led to a lot of funny moments, like the infamous Luigi death stare thing. And to help freshen up the mode, it could get some new improvements, such as a dedicated video editor feature in a very similar manner to the one that they just added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where you can take clips from your Mario Kart races and edit them together. And I would want a new online function for it, where you can share these clips directly to existing social media or on the Nintendo Switch app or something. And finally, the Mario Kart shop option. This would be an option that simply gives you instant access to the Nintendo eShop and shows everything the game would offer in the form of DLC, which, yes, I would believe that this next installment would have DLC after a certain amount of time from the release of the game. And I still want the base game to be packed with content before all else, but I just think it would be cool to have loads of new content added into the game far from release in a very similar manner to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It keeps the hype for the game going. And that about covers all the standard modes that would be needed to make my ideal game for the next installment of the Mario Kart series. I just wanted to simply outline the general structure for this game and cover the main modes that would return and how they would change. But before we end this part of the video series off, let's circle back around to that new mode I mentioned earlier, being a brand new story mode for the game. I think that what this next Mario Kart needs to really stand it out as one of the best of the series yet is to bring in a big new form of single player content. Most of the Mario Kart series is pretty much known for its weak single player content, with the exception of one game, which is Mario Kart DS and its mission mode. To really bring in all sorts of players to this game, I think that the next Mario Kart should feature an ambitious story mode campaign. And I know, I am aware that a decently sized story mode alongside a full game with all sorts of content already is no easy challenge to develop. But if it's going to be some few years before we see the next installment, why not use all that time to its fullest potential? Well, okay then, Knucks, so how would you do a story mode in a Mario Kart game? Well, I have a slight idea of how to do one. Firstly, the general concept of this story mode is that it is a mix between the story mode of Diddy Kong Racing and that mission mode from Mario Kart DS. Diddy Kong Racing is one of the most unique racing games due to its story mode and hub world. I think that Mario Kart could take a few pages out of that game and use it to inspire the basis for its story mode. It doesn't have to do it in the exact same way, of course. As I explained, this story mode would also take a page from Mario Kart DS's mission mode as well, having both missions of the main story and side quests work in a similar manner to within that game. But now, let me outline the vision of this story mode by giving a full picture for how I would do the story mode if given full control to do so. The story mode starts with a fancy CGI cutscene to show off the introduction to the story. Since this is not only a Mario game but a Mario Kart game, I'm not going to get too crazy with the plot of this story, but I want to throw in some interesting ideas. My plot for the story mode is this. One day, Princess Peach invites all the characters who are drivers in this game to a massive island filled with multiple of the racetracks throughout the game. Here, she plans to hold a big competition and the winner is crowned the greatest racer ever or something like that. She starts it off with a big ceremony party. As the ceremony is going well, it suddenly goes left when a big villain interrupts the party and begins causing havoc. For my ideal villain of this story, I would prefer it being someone who isn't a driver on the roster, meaning that the main villain can't be Bowser, since he's always playable in these games. Maybe the villain could be an entirely new one, or they bring in an old character to solely be the bad guy. If I could pick someone for this role, it'd definitely be 𝗰𝗲𝗃 from Diddy Kong Racing, as he was a goofy yet kind of intimidating villain in that game. Of course, in terms of the likelihood of this, it is very small to none. With the whole 𝗰𝗲𝗃 thing, he really hasn't been used since the remake of Diddy Kong Racing on the Nintendo DS. And not only that, but it's also up in the air as to who exactly owns him, as he could be a Rare character for all I know. I know that Nintendo worked with Rare recently to get Banjo-Kazooie in Smash, but I'm not as sure as if they would put that kind of crazy effort in for something like Mario Kart. Also, I know how Nintendo just loves to have Bowser as the final big baddie of Mario games these days. But again, this is just my own thoughts and personal vision, so I will stick to 𝗰𝗲𝗃 because it's a cool throwback. Now where was I? Oh yeah. So 𝗰𝗲𝗃 wreaks havoc on the island and he takes over the whole thing using his magic. He uses his powers to lock up most of Mario's friends and allies behind magic locked doors, and he brainwashes everyone who wasn't locked up into being his new personal goons to do his bidding. He gives the keys to different parts of the island and the dungeon rooms to both the brainwashed characters and different boss enemy characters that he persuaded to his side. So with all that craziness over, it's shown that the only one who made it out not locked up or brainwashed is of course Mario. So now, it's up to Mario to slowly rescue all of his friends and foes alike and team up together to take down 𝗰𝗲𝗃 and send him back where he came from. When you beat a brainwashed character under 𝗰𝗲𝗃's control, they regain consciousness and join Mario in his quest, and are able to be played as, just like in World of Light where you free Smash fighters from 𝗂𝗲𝗄𝗆's influence. And of course, you get keys from bosses to unlock different parts of the island and to unlock dungeon doors holding even more characters as well. Again, with each person you free, you unlock them to use in story mode and in the other modes. Speaking of bosses, the bosses in this game can work in a similar manner to the ones in the original mission mode within Mario Kart DS, where each one has their own little creative challenge and ways to beat them. To make this easier, they could bring back the ones from that game or use bosses from more recent games such as ones from Mario Odyssey. To reach these bosses in each area they reside in, you win races and beat challenges to progress. Since races would require the other characters, and most of them are trapped in the context of this story, maybe you could just have robot versions of existing ones or shadow clones that you race against. I don't know. But anyway, winning these missions and races can not only help you progress, but could also help you unlock all sorts of Mario Kart goodies, such as car parts and all that other stuff. After mowing through all the different parts of the island, you eventually can make it to the big pigman himself and beat him in a race to end the story mode, getting one last CGI cutscene to really hammer in that victory. If we want to go full Diddy Kong Racing here, maybe you have to beat him twice in order to get the true ending or something like that. But yeah, that was my crazy dream for a story mode in the next Mario Kart game. I know it was definitely an ambitious idea, and I think if we do get a story mode, it won't be that expansive at all. But at the very least, if we can't get that, it would be pretty cool to get the return of mission mode. So those were some of my ideas for how I would want to see the next installment of Mario Kart. Of course, that was only part 1, as there are still some areas I have to touch, such as characters, racetracks, and items. So if you want to see the next part uploaded real soon, please leave a like if you enjoyed the ideas and concepts that were presented in this video. Also, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of my ideas here, and give me some ideas of your own. And last, but certainly not least, make sure to subscribe to the channel for the next part and more videos like this one. Okay guys, this has been 𝗏𝗂𝘀𝗶𝗰, and I'm out. Peace.